Welcome to the African Briefing Room, where our story today takes us to France. The country's public debt is projected to reach 116% of GDP in 2025, up from 113% in 2024, a figure that continues to rise. Economists warn that the situation is unsustainable. But as the debt piles up, a more uncomfortable question lurks in the background. How did a nation that spent decades amassing wealth from Africa and the Caribbean now find itself drowning in debt? Segment 1. The debt picture today. France's finances are under severe strain. Official forecasts put the 2025 deficit at 5.6% of GDP, following an actual deficit of 5.8%, or €169.6 billion in 2024. The government's stated target is 5.4%, but so far, budget constraints have proved stubborn. Within the EU, only Greece and Italy have reported higher debt levels. The once sturdy image of France is looking distinctly frayed. Despite its reputation for stability, France now faces a fiscal balancing act, with ratings agencies and Brussels pressing for real spending cuts. Segment 2. The colonial cushion. But the economic story does not start, and certainly does not end in Paris. It goes back to France's colonial empire, which spanned large parts of Africa and the Caribbean, where generations of people and vast natural resources helped build France's wealth for over a century. The mechanism was straightforward. France extracted diamonds, gold, uranium, cocoa, coffee, oil, and much more. Preferential trade agreements and the forced labor of colonial subjects poured wealth into French coffers. Even after the formal empire ended, the economic bond lingered. 14 countries maintained their currencies within the CFA franc system, keeping their economies closely tied to Paris. Although currency reforms in West Africa have stalled, and the echo is now delayed until at least 2027, the euro peg remains in force, continuing France's economic influence in the region, regardless of local preference. French corporations like Orano and TotalEnergies have long secured contracts for key African resources, but the landscape is rapidly changing. Orano's uranium operations in Niger, once important to France's nuclear energy supply, are now on the verge of bankruptcy after Niger's government seized control of the mine and moved toward nationalization, a clear sign of governments in the region reclaiming resource sovereignty. Academic studies confirmed that colonial trade monopolies contributed to persistent losses for African producers and long-term underdevelopment. Colonial extraction helped cushion France's budgets during crucial post-war decades, creating fiscal space that supported ambitious social programs alongside other economic drivers. Segment 3. The moral ledger. There's a striking contradiction. While France's spending power is declining, the profits and unresolved legacy of its colonial past continue to shape the present. For decades until now, France benefited from direct financial flows from countries under the CFA franc system, with African central banks in the CFA franc zone required to keep much of their foreign reserves in Paris. This arrangement also enabled France to secure low-cost contracts for vital raw materials from these specific countries. The arrangement has long bred resentment in West and Central Africa. The region has seen a surge of political uprising, from regime changes by force to the mass expulsion of French troops, marking a clear unraveling of France's influence and the old post-colonial order. Even former French President Jacques Chirac acknowledged the underlying reality. "Without Africa, France will slide down into the rank of a third world power," he remarked in 2008, an admission, rare among Western leaders, of deep-rooted dependency. Now the structures that once supported French prosperity are eroding. Access to resources are being cut off, and political ties are fraying. In August 2025, French President Emmanuel Macron took the unusual step of formally acknowledging the violence and repression inflicted by France during Cameroon's struggle for independence. Responding to a new historical report detailing French atrocities, including mass killings and forced internment during the 1940s through the 1970s, Macron accepted France's role and responsibility in a letter addressed to Cameroon's President Paul Biya, which was publicly released mid-August 2025. But Macron stopped short of offering a formal apology or discussing reparations, a move that left many Cameroonians skeptical. For critics, acknowledgement without concrete accountability or restitution rings hollow, especially as anti-French sentiment spreads through the region. This gesture comes at a delicate time for Cameroon itself. The country is expected to hold presidential elections in October 2025. Paul Biya, now 92 years old and Africa's longest-serving leader, has announced his intention to run once again. As political uncertainty mounts at home and France faces scrutiny for its historical role, the dynamics between the two nations reflect a broader shift. Paris is struggling to maintain its foothold in a continent intent on charting its own course. Segment 4. The cost of power projection. Despite the fiscal headaches, the defense budget in Paris keeps growing. The country's 2024 military budget stands at 47.2 to 48.5 billion euros, with new legislation aiming to gradually increase the annual budget to 60 billion euros by 2030. Recent government plans set an even more ambitious target, projecting approximately 64 billion euros by 2027. Continued investment in warships, fighter jets, and overseas bases, along with costly operations in Africa, demonstrates that, even in a debt crisis, projections of power remain a political priority. Yet these choices carry costs at home. Segment 5. The cuts at home. As defense spending rises, the axe falls elsewhere. Social security payments, housing aid, and family benefits are frozen at 2025 levels, with no adjustment for inflation. Planned pension reforms aim to stabilize deficits at around 5 billion euros annually through the rest of the decade. Health spending actually increased by 3.4% in 2025, with 1 billion euros in new hospital funding. But government plans call for 5 billion euros in health cuts in 2026. Public sector job cuts for 2025 are slated at 2,200 positions, with more than 4,000 teaching posts affected, which is part of a wider 40 billion euros savings effort. Even national holidays are under review. Easter Monday and May 8th could be scrapped, measures aimed at boosting tax revenue by adding extra workdays. French Prime Minister François Bayrou launched a podcast, FB Direct, and a YouTube video series to personally communicate the urgency of France's budget reforms to the public. In an episode released in early August 2025, Bayrou warned, "The effort has to be made now. There is no tomorrow. We can't put it off till tomorrow." He stressed that France's national debt is almost beyond comprehension, urging citizens to understand the difference between making voluntary efforts today and facing forced sacrifices in the future. By speaking directly to viewers and listeners on these platforms, Bayrou emphasized that, without immediate spending cuts, France will pay a much higher price down the line. Segment 6. Repercussions and reckoning. The stakes extend beyond France's borders. As its economic foothold in Africa weakens, France's political influence is also in retreat. Tensions with countries like Algeria are rising, while Madagascar demands the return of royal remains, as well as sovereignty over 3 islands, Glorieuses, Juan de Nova, and Europa, off the coast of Mozambique, that remain under French administration. In 2025, Senegal ordered the closure of all French military bases, marking the end of a 65-year troop presence. This move follows dramatic regional shifts, with the AES alliance comprising Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger having expelled thousands of French soldiers. Across the continent, these withdrawals signal not a redefined relationship, but a decisive effort by African governments to cut ties with their former colonial power and assert full sovereignty on their own terms. Closing reflection. The debt clock ticks on. Yet despite France's immense wealth, much of it accumulated through centuries of extraction from former colonies, the nation now finds itself battling a deepening debt crisis. The real question confronting France may no longer be just about balancing the books, but about how to reckon with the wealth and opportunities acquired from countries still grappling with the aftermath of its colonial rule. In the end, France's fiscal drama and its colonial legacy remain tightly intertwined, inseparable chapters in the broader story of its present dilemma.